So we returned the World Bible, and the Parsi is the part that I'll be reading today. The religion which might have been ours. On a marble throne high above the narrow strait which stretched between the island of Salamis and the southern coast of Attica in 480 BCE, the great Xerxes sat waiting to watch his navy defeat the Greek fleet. At his back burned the city of Athens, fired by the torches of his soldiers. At the pass of Thermopylae lay the bodies of 300 Spartans with that of their leader, Leonidas, slain by the Asiatic host of the Persian Empire. There remained only the task of destroying the Greek fleet, to wipe out the bitter shame of the Persian failure at the Marathon 10 years before, and to establish the Persian Empire in Greece, from whence it could sweep throughout Europe. The Persian ships outnumbered the Greek fleet 3-1 and were of heavier construction, but the Greeks, using the same superior strategy at sea that Miltiades had used on the land at Marathon, sank 200 of the Persian vessels, captured others, and drove the rest from the strait. The flight of the terror-stricken Xerxes signals not only the end of his kingdom of conquest in Europe, but also a vastly changed religious prospect for the Western world. For according to no less an authority than the late Max Müller, had it not been for the Persian defeats at the decisive battles of Marathon and Salamis, if, in other words, the western march of the Persian Empire had not been stopped there, Zoroastrianism rather than Judeo-Christianity would undoubtedly have been the prevailing religion of Europe and the Americas. Yet, in spite of these crushing military and naval defeats, the resulting decline of the Persian Empire and the eventual near extinction of Zoroastrianism, so great was this religion's vitality and so appealing to the human heart, were many of its concepts and precepts, that much of Zarathustra's creed lives on in the religions of Israel and Christ. And those who deny the one religion theory say that Zoroastrianism are actually Zarathustra or Mazayasnian, Zarathustrian, whatever, the later Persian, is the most influential religion of all mankind. But Zarathustra would not have been thought of as a follower, as a founder of a prophet, as a founder of a religion. None of them did. The date when a branch of the Indo-European family moved into Persia, like the date of their brother's entrance into India, is unknown. It is probable that the migration took place between the time when Abraham was said to have made a compact with Yahweh about 2000 BCE, and actually there's reason to think that the Abraham thing goes back further than that it's closer to 3100 BCE, the century after that point. When Moses led the children of Israel out of their captivity about 1200 BCE, right before Merneptah referred to the Israelis as a historical people, the oldest reference to the Israelis, evidences of Indo-European names and of worship of the old Indo-European gods are found among the Mitanni of Upper Euphrates Valley during the century 1400 to 1300 BCE. The region upon which the newcomers settled was an elevated tableland, parts of which were well watered, but which included areas that needed irrigation to make its fruitful soil productive. Irrigation and tillage meant food and social solidity. Sloth and neglect brought social ruin. Evidences of their early religion are scant, but show many traces similar to the Vedic religion of India. They paid homage to the sun god Mitra, whom they called Mithra, the sky god Varuna, who is sometimes called Ahura, equivalent of the Indian Asura and forerunner of the one god Ahura Mazda, the fire god Agni, and the old thunderer Indra. And it's important, I think, is it out of Kabul or something in Afghanistan? One of the oldest, one of the couple oldest fire temples. The Mazda-Yasnian group goes there, they worship God, and they share it with the Hindus, though. So the Hindus worship the fire. So that could be some of the misconception about these people being fire worshippers. There is evidence that Ahura Mazda existed in their conceptions before the birth of Zoroaster, but apparently as only one of a list of gods, just as in the earlier conception of the Jews, Yahweh was one of many gods, the tribal god of Abraham, and only later became Jehovah, the one God, maker of heaven and earth. And actually all the prophets, they came to say, hey, there's only one God, all these different names are just the same God. But Yahweh was known among the Arabs before the Israelites. So, but, they didn't consider just one. But they didn't consider the higher transcendent God just one either. It was a Godhead somewhere there. So, the early Persians believed that all good things came to them from a religion of light above, and all evil from a region of darkness below. Did I say region of light? I should have said region of light. Unto this people, who depended on the rigorous tillage of the soil for their livelihood, was born Zarathustra, or Zoroaster, about 660 BCE. Again, the Parsis say it's 8,000 years ago, which does make sense in some details of the story. 4,000 years ago is more likely evidence-wise, but that could have been a revival as well, because their linguistic indications, in particular, that they're referring to something even older than 4,000 years ago. But anyways, thus his influence was felt in that great age of religious conscience and reformation, a little more than half a millennia before the birth of Christ, during which in India the Upanishads were furthering a conception of Brahma as the supreme god, and Gautama Buddha as the great enlightener was born. When in China Confucius and Lao Tzu were quickening, Confucius is actually the real name of Confucius, but anyways, Lao Tzu is, were quickening the moral and religious perceptions of men. And in Israel, the pre-exilic prophets were paving the way for the pure monotheism of later Judaism. There is no certainty as to the exact locality of Zarathustra's birth or of the details of his early life. The traditional accounts are interesting chiefly because of the fundamental similarity which exists between the stories of his birth and those of other great leaders. Here, too, the sense of shame that accompanies the thought of sex in many early religions is evidenced by a tradition of the sexless conception. How Tsia, one of the first ancestors of China, was conceived when his mother stepped upon a footprint of the god. Now there's more being said. Shame about sex, or thinking that even marital sex is not quite pure. Sometimes that existed, but there's more to the virgin birth idea than that. And I'm not just talking about lizards or something, immaculately conceiving, or is it lizards? Some lizards, or some. There are creatures that do. Not just worms. The conception of the Buddha came about when the Buddha himself, in the form of a white elephant, struck his future mother on the side with his trunk while she was dreaming. Jesus was immaculately conceived of a virgin by the Holy Ghost, and the conception of Zarathustra took place when his mother, also a virgin, who was dazzled by the radiance of her body, took the milk that had miraculously appeared in 2 white virgin cows after they had eaten from a branch of the sacred hyoma plant on which the archangels had carried Zarathustra's spirit to earth. During his childhood, according to the same accounts in the Pahlavi text, he showed many evidences of wisdom and enlightenment, as did Christ preaching in the temple, and Gautama when he saw the 4 signs. He enunciated the principle of duality in the universe. When I looked upwards, he said, I saw that our souls go up to the sky. That our souls go up to the sky will go up to the best existence. When I looked downwards, I saw the demon and the fiend, the wizard and the witch, become buried below in the earth and fall paralyzed back to hell. When he was 30, he announced his righteous purpose. After having talked at great length with the archangels, and as Satan tempted Christ, and Mara attempted to turn the Buddha from his mission, forth rushed Engramenyu, the deadly, the Dava of the Davas, and attempted to slay Zarathustra before he could preach his gospel of righteousness. During the early years of his ministry, he reported to have had several visions in which he spoke with archangels and Ahura Mazda. For 10 years, using these visions as evidence of his authority, he sought converts in vain. Then, after long pleading, he succeeded in converting the monarch Vishtaspa, and under royal patronage, the success of the new religion became assured in the country of its birth in his 47th year, according to the Pahlavi text. In his 78th, according to the more generally accepted theory of the scholar A.V.W. Jackson, Zarathustra died, leaving behind him a lusty religion built on love of the earth and its fruits, whole-souled worship of the one God, Ahura Mazda, an enlightened ethical code, and the healing goodness of work. Such a creed towered high above the ceremonial polytheism which had existed in Iran before his birth. The inclusive name for the sacred scriptures of Zoroastrianism is Avesta. The books included the Yasna, of which the 17 Gathas or Psalms are a part, the Visparad, the Vendadad, and the Yashts. In Zarathustra's doctrine, there was no place for a sterile asceticism or profitless ceremonials. His was a worship of life in its full burgeoning. The highest religious exercise possible was complete cooperation with the beneficent forces of nature. His theology was fundamental and simple. Ahura Mazda is the omniscient and potently omnipotent creator of the universe, who made the good earth and instructed man to till it, delaying full realization of his omnipotence and undoing as many of his good works as possible was Engramenyu, who is all death, and who counter-created evil. But the heavenly helpers, good thought, perfect righteousness, and others will eventually make it possible for Ahura Mazda to destroy Engramenyu and achieve his righteous all-powerfulness. Ahura Mazda makes rigorous demands of righteousness upon mankind. This righteousness consists of truthfulness, kindness, benevolence, justice, devotion to God, and good works, especially in the field of agriculture, where weedless stands of green are more efficacious in the matter of salvation than our prayers. Here is no place for a hypocrisy which may build a reputation for sanctity on pious words, prayers, and religious ceremonies. A man's field may be seen. All matters connected with agriculture are given an accented religious importance. Earth itself is surrounded by special sanctity and is almost personified in the Zenda Vesta, in which Ahura Mazda recounts the 5 places in which the earth feels most happy, the 5 where it feels sorest grief, and the 5 kinds of persons who rejoice the earth with greatest joy. The 5 places of the earth's happiness, in the order of their importance, are as follows. The first is where one of the faithful steps forward. The second is where one of the faithful erects a house with the priest within, with cattle, with a wife, with children and good herds within, and wherein afterwards the cattle continue to thrive, virtue to thrive, fodder to thrive, the dog to thrive, the wife to thrive, the child to thrive, the fire to thrive, and every blessing of life to thrive. The third place of the earth's great happiness is where the faithful sows most corn, grass, and fruit, where he waters the ground that is dry, or drains ground that is too wet. The fourth is the place where is the most increase of flocks and herds. The fifth, where flocks and herds yield most dung. Now, of course, the Bible doesn't speak well of dogs, but other scriptures speak well of dogs. Particularly they're working animals. There's a difference between having some filthy animal in your house as a pet and actually having it be a guard dog or something useful. But the love of the world is prescribed in true religion or true spirituality. That's not saying that the love of God is not greater than all else, is that being your goal. But the love of the world is definitely something that's prescribed upon. It's perfectly natural. We don't need to fight that. We need to use the world properly. So sacred is the holy earth that it must not be contaminated by the touch of dead bodies, which putrefy quickly in the Persian climate. Instead of being buried, these are disposed of by being deposited in towers of silence on grills where the birds may peck the bones clean of flesh before they at last drop to the ground. Indeed, the earth feels the sorest grief, where most corpses of dogs and men lie buried, according to the Zendavesta, and the first who rejoices the earth with greatest joy is he who digs out of it most corpses of dogs and men. And if Vishtaspa is given the correct period, it could be that Vishtaspa, being in northern Europe at that time, but later on, northern Asia culture, the sky burial and stuff was more common in that region for some reason. I guess because the mountains were so high. That was implemented then. The earlier evidences don't seem the sky burial is something late in Persian culture, for the most part. The emphasis upon the goodness and usefulness of the dog is one of the most beautiful details in this religion of shepherds and cattlemen, which, but for 2 defeats in battle, might have been the religion of the Western world. The dog, with its prickly back, with the long and thin muzzle, is the good creature among the creatures of the good spirit. The prickly back, they don't mean a porcupine or a hedgehog or something, do they? Whosoever shall smite either a shepherd's dog or a house dog, his soul, when passing to the other world, shall fly, howling louder and more sorely grieved than the sheep does in the lofty forest where the wolf ranges. Various strict rules protect this good creature among the creatures. If a bitch whelps while at large, she and her puppies are the strict responsibility of the man nearest whose house she is. Now, nowadays we don't tend to use that word because people use it wrong, but back in the day, ass meant donkey. But people needed to change their Bible translations because of the change in the culture. He must care for her and for her puppies until they are old enough to care for themselves. And if one of them dies through his neglect, he is to suffer the same penalty as if he killed it, which is to say, the same penalty as he would if he had killed a man. Now, that's going too far. Maybe blood money. There is no animal worship involved in this, no superstitious formalism of sacred beast. The dog is of the earthly. The Zoroastrian attitude towards him is simply one of the evidences of the lustiness and at the same time the goodness of Zarathustra's creed. By Zoroastrian rules, dog life was protected as human life was, first perhaps because of his usefulness to a people dependent upon herds and flocks, but also because of the recognition of the character of the dog, which has marked true and realistic dog lovers of all times. And one of the weird things in that group is that they have a dog. Before they, the has to look at the naked body of the corpse of the human before it's, put on the sky burial thing, which is interesting. Why did they have this? We can't put them up there, we can't bury them until a dog looks at it. It's like, but there's not any, we have to, In Ahura Mazda, we find for the first time in the history of any religion a clear and vigorous conception of the universal loving Father God as the only imaginable God. Now, the Father thing, no prophet really took the Father thing literally. A conception which eventually came to us through later Judaism and Christianity. And in Judaism, it was a figure of speech that they used for David and Solomon and all sorts of people. It also meant somebody attached to the house of worship. Ahura Mazda is the father of the toiling good mind within us. His daughter is piety. He is the one with the bounteous spirit. He is the creator of all. He is the Lord of the good spirit. The souls of the righteous will dwell in eternal immortality in his kingdom. He is the Lord of saving power, a friend, a brother, a father to us, Mazda, Lord. He has many names, among which are the one of whom questions are asked, the herds giver, the strong one, perfect holiness, understanding, knowledge, weal, most beneficent, he in whom there is no harm, unconquerable one, all-seeing one, and all-healing one. He is the glory that cannot be forcibly seized. Now, the Quran, Islamic literature has 319 names of God, but for some reason they've picked the same. The four list of 99 add up to 101. That Muhammad taught, anyways. So there's correlation there. Intended especially for Zoroastrian priests are the 5 dispositions and 10 admonitions, in which all instruction as to religion is connected. The 5 dispositions are innocence, discrimination between thoughts, words, and deeds, to distinguish destruction from indestructiveness and production from unproductiveness, authoritativeness, steadfastness in religion, and to struggle prayerfully day and night with your own fiend. The 10 admonitions are: proceed with good repute, avoid evil repute, do not beat your teacher with a stick. What about the student? Whatever is taught to you, deliver back to the worthy. Rewards for doers of good works are punishment for the workers of evil, must be established by law. In other words, they are not to be administered by the clergy. The Achaemenids kind of changed that, and who was it right before, during the time of Muhammad and Jesus, and there was a lot of trying to force religion on people, but that was not the original way. Keep the way of the good open to your house. Do not remain in penitence of sin. Force malice away from your thoughts. Keep ever progressing with the progress of this religion. Do not go backwards. Obey the ruler and the priestly authority. In Islam, it's tempered in terms of, you obey God and you obey the messenger and those in authority over you, sort of if, they're not trying to have you go against the other. But the simplicity and broadness of these rules for priesthood are in marked contrast to the elaboration of parallel rules in the Indian religions, and the radical character of the ninth admonition marks Zoroaster as a man with vision and a forward-looking intellect, almost unparalleled among religious lawmakers. Keep ever progressing towards the progress of this religion and do not go backwards. So... Well, you can return to fundamentals because, it's not the religion of your ancestors because this, because of this, because of this. The Talmud shows some of the problems with that one. For consideration of the nature of the Zoroastrian heaven and hell, the veneration paid the souls of the faithful, and the reverence for the undying, shining, swift-horsed sun, we will leave you with the texts themselves. What if this religion, instead of Judeo-Christianity, had become our faith? Would we have a vastly different theology and a code of ethical conduct? We would believe in a loving Father God who is omniscient, well, the father thing, no, not really, but, and concerned with the welfare of his children. We would have, instead of Jesus, Zarathustra, who was not particularly the Son of God, was sent to earth by God to spread his doctrine and do his work. We would look forward to the kingdom of God. We would have the ancient statements of a religion of darkness and of a region of darkness and a region of light, of heaven and hell, of the good power in conflict with the evil. We would have Angra instead of Satan, a mere difference in name. We would have angels and archangels. We would have a similar, we would have a statement of the final resurrection of the dead, very similar to that in the Judeo-Christian Bible. These things we have now. Did they come to us from the pious, vigorous mind of Zarathustra, led by the way of the later prophets of Israel and Christ, or were they original concepts of Judeo-Christianity? How well acquainted of the chroniclers of the Jewish Old Testament were the chronicles of the Jewish Old Testament were with the Persian branch of the Indo-European wanderers is evidenced by their frequent references to the Medes, the Persians, and the Hittites. The Reavash was also a Messiah. Kurash was a Messiah in the Bible. Persian and Hittite. But there's also definite evidence of borrowing from Zoroastrianism in the religious creeds which Christianity absorbed from later Judaism. Up to the time of the exile, the source of both good and evil in the religion of the Israelites was thought to be the God of Jehovah, but after the exile, which is to say after the influence of Zarathustra's monotheistic doctrine began to be felt, the Old Testament writers recorded the doctrine that Jehovah was the one God of the universe and a God of pure righteousness, while Satan was charged with all evil creations. It is probable that Satan, or the devil in later Judaism and Christianity, is none other than Angra, the archdava of Zoroastrianism. The elaborate angelology and demonology of later Judaism, the idea of divine judgment and a final resurrection, and a future life in a region which may be definitely described, all seem to have come from the doctrines of Zarathustra, though there is no definite proof of this. Indeed, there are Christian and Hebrew commentators who believe that Zoroastrianism borrowed these concepts from later Judaism, but they speak with less conviction than do those who hold the opposite view. Almost certainly, the Magi, who are said to have visited Jesus in the manger, were Zoroastrian priests, and Christ's word paradise was taken from the Persian Pyridaza. In the field of human ethics and social behavior, we would have in Zoroastrianism a code which, if followed, would produce a state of human welfare that would be difficult to surpass. Perhaps the chief differences would be in matters of emphasis. While Zoroastrianism and Christianity both state the necessity of faith and works, the emphasis in Christianity is on faith, and Zoroastrianism is on works. When Alexander the Great conquered Persia and Greek cities were established there, the decline of Zoroastrianism began. The pure one, time immemorial, really, whenever it started, just as the message of all prophets is, well, almost all of them. Under the Mohammedans, the decline continued until today. There are scarcely 10,000 followers of Zarathustra in the land of his birth. They call themselves Parsis, from Pars or Persia, and about 100,000 in India. Well, apparently there's a lot more, but anyways, I'll continue this with Zoroastrianism scriptures from the Bunda Hiss and the other 4 parts, really. The Vendadad, the Pahlavi text, the Vesta. Okay.